So welcome and thank you again for inviting me back. So as I say, this is the third of the 4 webinars that I'm going to be running. Got the final one happening in a couple of weeks as part of the CBC Wellness Campaign, the Science of Wellness series. So this one is going to be about communication and communicating, reacting in your communication versus responding in your communication. And before we start, I've just got one basic guideline that anything that I say today, think of it as an offering or a suggestion. Don't feel like you have to do anything that I'm saying in the webinar. Do it or don't do it. The choice is completely yours, and I want you to know that you are at choice. So for those of you that haven't attended any of the other ones before, I'm David Brown. I'm going to be running the session today. I'm a professional life coach as well as a trainer and facilitator, and I run lots of different types of workshops on things like stress management, resilience, self-confidence, and also well-being. And some of the other hats that I wear is I'm a martial arts instructor, and I'm also a Samaritans volunteer. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, I just want to set out the context of what we're going to be looking at today. So we're talking about communication, and very particularly, communication mostly is absolutely fine. We go about our days interacting with people online and offline, and the way that we communicate is mostly just fine. But there are times when we're feeling stressed, when we're feeling anxious, and we find ourselves communicating in a reactive way. In other words, not always aware of how we're behaving and what we're saying, how we're interacting with people. And so therefore not feeling like we're at choice about the way that we communicate. And that's what I mean when I use the phrase reactive. And it's in these situations that we can perhaps do the most damage in our personal and professional relationships, which can influence how effective we are as leaders, as team players, and as individuals, both at work and in our private lives. So it's important to find a way to become responsive in these situations. In other words, to be at choice about how you communicate in any given situation, which can have a massive impact on your self-confidence, on your self-esteem, on how you are perceived by others, as well as having a powerful impact on your relationships. So in that context, today we're going to be looking at what reactive communication is, what it looks like and feels like, so that you can develop that awareness. What responsive communication looks and feels like, so that you can be at choice to either shift from being reactive to being responsive. And then I'm going to give you a tool that will allow you to shift from being reactive to being responsive, so that you can be at choice in any given situation. So that's what I've got planned for today. And before I launch into that, I just invite you to join me in taking a moment to pause. So if you're eating a sandwich, just for a moment, put the sandwich down. If you're playing on your mobile, put the mobile down, your cutlery. Sit comfortably in your seat, feel your feet on the floor. Feel your bum on your seat, and maybe even close your eyes to give yourself an opportunity to really relax. And also to notice your breathing. And to think about, how are you right now? If you were to pick maybe 1, 2, or 3 words that would describe how you're feeling right now, I invite you to maybe just put 1 or 2 of those words into the chat, so that I've got a sense of who's in the room and how things are for people right now. And while you're doing that, if you're feeling less resourced today, then please exercise self-care and perhaps go a little gentle with yourself today. If you're feeling more resilient and more resourced, then perhaps challenge yourself a little bit, and perhaps you might therefore get more out of the session if you did that. So we've got people feeling happy, uplifted, stressed, calm, unsettled, tired, calm, still in long weekend mode, so struggling to focus on work, yeah, stressed. Great, fantastic. Okay, great. So thanks for letting me know about that. Okay-ish, as it's stressed, but also grateful. Fantastic. Okay, so just bear that in mind with respect to how we're going, so that you're always looking after yourself. That's the most important thing, and do what you need to do that. Thank you, everybody. So let's start with reactive behavior in communication. So as I mentioned earlier, we can become reactive when we're stressed or when we're anxious. And particularly in our world today, when there's so many things that can make us stressed and make us anxious, that reactive behavior can be quite common. So I'd like you to take a moment to think about, well, what sort of things make you stressed? And if you could just put maybe one or two of those in the chat as well. So you might find that the fast-paced life and being in a rush makes you stressed. Maybe multitasking, colleagues, loss of control, maybe health, lack of sleep, yeah. COVID itself, changing plans, yeah, uncertainty, expectations of self and others, noise, multitasking, restrictions, yeah. Yeah, maybe your partners, maybe you've had an argument with somebody that you care about, or maybe getting a subject line in an email that makes you go, oh God, or having a challenging conversation with somebody that you know that you've got to have. Yeah, problems with people. Yeah, lockdown. Yeah, coming out of restrictions, the how and when. Yeah, huge thing for a lot of people at the moment. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So again, thank you everybody for sharing. So when these things are happening in your life where you feel stressed and anxious, it's more likely that you might communicate in this reactive way. And so what does reactive behavior look like in communication? Well, you'll be familiar with the expression fight or flight. It's one of those colloquial expressions that people talk about when they talk about the stress response. Which is the sort of the scientific phrase for it. So for example, if you're in fight, then you might be passive aggressive, or you might be overly argumentative, or you might be quite sarcastic or cynical in the way that you communicate. Or if you're in flight, you may find yourself disengaging from communication or withdrawing in your relationships, blanking people, or even ignoring people. But the stress response, there's more elements that they've kind of discovered about the stress response. And one of these is freezing. So you see this, for example, if you go for a walk in nature, you'll walk along the path, and just as you get to an animal will break cover, and you wouldn't even have known that it was there. And that's referred to as the freeze response. And in communication, sometimes we might find that we get really shy and we become really quiet. We get tongue-tied, or we might even forget what it is that we wanted to say. Another example of the stress response or fight or flight is that we fold. So we might find that we acquiesce without even knowing why we do it. Or we give ground when we're trying to hold with our particular boundaries. Or we might say yes when we actually really want to say no. And that's something that I'm going to be looking at in a couple of weeks' time. And the fifth and final one for the stress response is fawning. So perhaps over flattery or praise for people, exaggerated affection or people pleasing. This can be another example of the stress response where we kind of just do it automatically. It's like our defense mechanism, okay? And we don't often know that we're doing it. So these reactions happen without thinking. And your greatest weapon is to develop an awareness of when you're doing it in the moment. So that's why right at the beginning of the webinar, I asked you, how are you doing right now? So that we took a moment to be able to identify those things. So let's take a moment now to think of a situation where you might feel quite stressed that you're going to need to communicate with someone. Think of something that's personal for you so that this webinar is helpful. So it could be that email with the subject line that feels quite upsetting to you, or maybe you're going to have a feedback session with a manager and you're feeling quite stressed. Or maybe it's confrontation with a stranger. So particularly as we're becoming more socialized in shops, public transport, we're starting to interact with people that we don't know in a different way again. A disagreement maybe with your partner. So choose something as well that fits your resilience. And so just take a moment, maybe again, to close your eyes and to allow yourself to let yourself become aware of that situation. I don't want you to upset yourself or overly stress yourself, but what do you notice happening in your body? And I invite you to write one or two of those in the chat. So you might notice maybe that your heart beats faster, or that your breathing becomes shallow, or you hold your breath. Yeah, that you tense up. And again, when you notice yourself tense up, where specifically do you tense up? Is it in your shoulders? Is it in your chest? Is it in your neck? Is it your tummy that feels tight? Yeah. Sometimes people clench their fists. Someone's tight jaw, stomach ache. Yeah. Tense in the neck. Yeah. Get headaches. Yeah. Feeling tearful, solar plexus. Yeah. Getting tense in the eyes as well. Dry mouth, tight throat. So as you're becoming aware of these things, it's just really valuable to know that if you notice yourself having that physical reaction, then that's telling you that you're stressed. Yeah, someone's written low appetite. Again, that can be almost like a long-term thing as well. Again, but again, all really valuable information for you. Rubbing the forehead. Yeah, exactly. So it's really important that you recognize these signs, because then it gives you information. It's telling you, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling anxious, and maybe now isn't the best time to write that email or to have that conversation where you need to be a bit, maybe phrase things just so to a colleague or a partner, or even to make important decisions. So that's the first stage. Now, the second stage is, now that we have that awareness, to have a technique. And there are lots of techniques that we could use, but because we've got limited time, I'm going to show you one technique today that allows you to move from being reactive to being responsive. And that technique is referred to, or I refer to, as centering. So it comes from many traditions, including yoga and meditation, and my first love, martial arts. So if you're in fight or flight or fawn, what centering does is it down-regulates your nervous system so that you feel calmer and you feel more balanced. And if you're in freeze or fold, what it can do is up-regulate your system so that you feel slightly more engaged, you feel slightly more aware and with it, so that you can respond effectively. Okay, so I'm going to use what's referred to as the ABC centering technique that I learned from one of my teachers, Mark Walsh. ABC stands for awareness. So there are like 3 phases to this. There's awareness, there's balance, and then there's core relaxation. Now you can do this sitting down if you want, but I invite you to practice it standing, because it gives you more versatility in the situations that you can use it in. I also invite you to do this with your eyes open, but of course you can do it with your eyes closed if you find that maybe there are lots of distractions around and it would be difficult to do that. But again, practicing it with your eyes open allows you again to be more versatile. So for example, you could do it while you're driving, you could do it in social situations to help you regulate. Okay, so I'm going to stand up and do this. Again, feel free to stand or to sit. Okay, I'm just going to move my screen up a little bit so that my head doesn't disappear. Okay, and so if you stand with your feet about shoulder width apart so that you feel nice and balanced and stable, and allow your eyes just to focus forward, maybe out the window, or you don't need to look at me because I'll be describing what you need to be doing. And bring your awareness to your feet on the floor, but also the sensations of your feet. And come up the leg to the calves and the lower leg, the thighs and the hips. Just being aware of the sensations of the body. Be aware of your lower back and your abdomen, your chest and your shoulder, your upper back and the shoulders. Just be aware of the sensations that are there. The upper arms, the lower arms and the hands, the neck and the head. And also be aware of the space to your right and left, in front of you and behind you, above and below. And now we're going to go through to the balance section. So if you're standing, then as best you can, make whatever slight adjustments you need to so that your weight feels evenly distributed along the soles of your feet. So you're not forward on the balls of your feet or back on the heels, just nicely balanced through. And balancing around your pelvis as well, so you're not over one leg or the other, but that you've got your balance over your pelvis. And if you're seated, then that's mostly where you want to start, feeling like you're balanced with your pelvis on the seat of the chair. And then feeling your shoulders and making sure your shoulders sit directly above your hips, so your spine is upright and supporting you, and that your head balances on the top of your spine. And then from here, we go into core relaxation. So starting at the forehead. So relaxing the forehead, relaxing the eyes, the muscles around the eyes, but also relaxing your gaze. So you have like a soft gaze. Relaxing your jaw, relaxing your tongue, your throat and your chest. Relaxing your tummy so that your tummy plops out. Relaxing your hips. And again, become aware of how you feel in your body right now. And so as we come back to the computer, I invite you to put 1 or 2 words in the chat as to how your body feels different now compared to. So maybe again, maybe your heart is beating slower. Maybe you notice that your breathing is calmer. Yeah, sometimes we can get a little sleepy. Again, so again, doing it standing up's helpful for that. Yeah, relaxed, centered, calmer. Good. Any particularly in the body? So does anything in particular feel looser, feel calmer, particularly the breathing or the belly? And for some people, perhaps who felt a little bit withdrawn, that maybe they feel a little more alert. Okay, so that's also helpful. Yeah, shoulders are looser. That's it. Marvelous. Great. Yeah, great. Yeah, and aware of objects. So again, this also heightens our awareness. We become more engaged, which is, again, Very, very helpful, or it can be. So thank you again for your sharing. So the point that I really want to emphasize here is that by doing this exercise, you changed your state. You made yourself feel more stressed and anxious by thinking of the situation that I asked you to do earlier. And you felt calmer by doing the centering. So the key here is that you have control, and you can be a choice if you take the steps to take control and be able to give yourself that opportunity to be at choice. So the first stage in that is that you need to be aware first, and then to have a technique that allows you to take that choice on. So what I invite you to do now is to think of that same situation that you were thinking of before. That one that leaves you feeling a little bit stressed or anxious. And if you want to change that situation, then that's absolutely fine. But think of that situation, and we're going to run through the centering again, but we're going to do it sat down this time. But if you'd like to stand, then by all means do so. So again, as you're seated, again, support your body. Don't slouch in the chair, because that's counterproductive. But for now, bring your awareness to your feet, lower legs and upper legs and the hips, tummy and lower back, chest and upper back, the shoulders and the arms, neck and the head. And be aware of the space around you, so front and back, above, below, right and left. And balance your body so that you're feeling stable. So through the pelvis, if you're standing, through the feet first, then the pelvis, shoulders above hips, head balanced on the spine. And then relaxing the core muscles, the forehead, the jaw, the tongue, throat, chest, tummy and pelvis. And a second C that you can also focus on is something that you care about. So maybe there's a person or a place or a pet or an activity that you just go, helps to make you feel calmer. Connect to that place. And then keeping that feeling in your body, that calmness, think of the situation. How would you respond to this situation from this place? And I invite you to take some notes about how you might respond. You might have found that useful. But I want you to realize that I have not told you how to respond. You came up with that yourself. Good. With compassion and empathy. Lovely. Yeah, exactly. So what we've done today is I've shown you something that allows you to self-regulate when you're feeling stressed and anxious. So rather than be reactive, that self-regulation allows you to be responsive. Centering creates conditions in the body that are incompatible with being stressed. And so you calm down. Yeah. And when you're not stressed, when you're more relaxed and you self-regulate, you make yourself calmer, kinder, and more intelligent, which ultimately means that you're more resourced. Okay. So that is what allows you to be more responsive when we center. So what we've looked at today is we've looked at developing awareness so that you can notice that you're stressed. Often we don't realize it. So it's good to catch it as early as possible. And a way to practice that is to set an alarm 2 or 3 times through your day. I've got it on my iPhone. I've got alarms set. And when the alarm goes off, it's just that reminder, okay, how am I right now? It takes 10 seconds. And then the second bit is to be at choice. You can cultivate that by practicing that ABC centering. You can just look it up on YouTube. Yeah, go on YouTube and find ABC centering, and you'll find it there. Of course, it'll be on this recording as well. Yeah, so you can practice that ABC centering technique once you've noticed how you are. And then the third thing that I said that we'd cover today is how to move from reactive to responsive. So this is the application stage. So when you find yourself in a situation where you're feeling stressed and you need to communicate, center first. And with practice, you'll be able to do it quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. But center first and then respond to that email. Then have that conversation that you know that you need to have. So before we get to the Q&A, all right, just want to wrap this up by simply saying, hopefully that you've got what you wanted to get out of this session. And if you have, then that's great. But you might find that over the hours and days that follow that maybe some more questions come or some more insights come that you might find helpful to talk to me about. If that is the case, then I'm just going to put my email address into the chat again. I do this every time. And all you have to do is just message me with yes, and I will get back to you and we'll be able to organize a time to speak. So I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you've learned something that's really helpful to help with your communication. And that I hope that that ABC centering technique is useful for you and that you practice it so that it can have benefits long after this particular event. So we're bang on at 1 o'clock. I've honored the time, but I've got 15 minutes put aside for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, then either put them. Oh, thank you for the thank yous. I really appreciate it. You are most welcome. And I'm glad that it's been helpful. So you're welcome. What if demands are being made on you to responsible now? So what I'm taking from that is that there is this sense of I actually have to respond to this in the moment. And this is something that is really important and why I emphasize this idea of practice rather than this idea of just leaving it until the moment. Like anything, if we practice something, we become more efficient and effective about it. It's like we train our nervous system to be able to do this better. I think that's what a lot of athletes refer to when they talk about muscle memory. I don't know whether that's true, but I think that there's definitely a thing where the nervous system, it's like you're building pathways in your nervous system. And one of the pathways that gets built up quite a lot is this stress pathway, because we live in such a stressful environment. But the reality is that we can practice to be calmer. We can practice to be calmer. And the more we practice, the easier being calmer becomes. And we all reach a point where a situation is so demanding that we can't respond, we just react. I had one just the other day with somebody, and however well practiced I am, I just wasn't well practiced enough for that situation. But for lots of situations, I'm much better than I used to be. So it is a process. It is a process of development and evolution where you practice being calmer. And the more you practice that, the better you get, and the more resilient, the more you practice, the more more challenging the situation can be, to allow you to be able to respond to it, not to react. So I hope that answers your questions. How do you cope with texts? People often expect instant replies. Again, so there is this thing of practice. So the more you practice centering, the quicker you can get into that calm place. So for example, you don't have to do this full technique that we just practiced, but for example, you can focus on your breathing, taking deep breaths. If you do it with me now, taking deep breaths in and out, and allow your attention to rest on your breathing. In and out. And although people might expect an instant reply, they can wait a minute, they could wait 5 minutes. But if it means that you're going to give a response that is more powerful, more effective, more insightful, more useful, more direct, more efficient, more effective, that maybe saves lots and to and fro and confusion and all of those things, then perhaps it's worth just waiting an extra 60 seconds or 2 minutes to write that response. That would certainly be my response to that particular question. I'm a real big one for, if it arrives on my phone, or if it arrives in my inbox, in my email inbox, I have to reply to it straight away. And I've learned over the years that actually 5 minutes is okay. Even 10 minutes is okay. But of course, it's very, very particular with each situation. Okay, so we have to take each situation in hand. But my question would be, does it need to be instant? And my experience in life is that very often that's an expectation that we place on ourselves, that we've taken on board for whatever reason. And maybe that's not true in every situation, but maybe it is with some. So, final question so far. What can we do if we're faced with the same problem over and over, and our practice with centering ourselves becomes less effective? So one of the things with problems that we face over and over is that it often means that we practice something, we practice unhelpful behavior. So we have a particular reaction to it. So, for example, if we use this thing of the text coming straight away, that I have to respond to it straight away. And we get ourselves into that. What happens is our body automatically starts to react where, well, so if I use my example, I can feel my heart beat faster. I can feel my tummy get tighter. I can feel my jaw start to clench. Those are some of the classic signs that tell me, oh, I'm in this thing. And so that can make it quite challenging to center. So this is when sometimes going for a walk, having a little bit of a shake and a move around, I think last time we did something around shaking a little bit, or maybe the time before, just finding a way to break that pattern of, oh, I've gone into this sort of panic or into this sort of stressed thing, and that actually there are other things that you can do to break that. So going for a walk, ringing a friend, having a workout, but even something as sure as just shaking your body. We did it last time, tapping or rubbing your arms and your legs and things like that to relax yourself. Even something like that can be enough to break that cycle that your body's got itself into. And then try centering. And I would imagine that you'd probably find that the centering will be more effective after that. Or just take longer centering. But centering is usually really effective, but it's worth experimenting with, well, okay, what things specifically really work for me? So not everybody is the same, and certain things might work better for you than others. So it's really just finding, you know, what is the sweet spot? What is the sweet spot for me? And because we're all individual, there's no one size fits all. Yeah, everything and anything to do with our self-care and our well-being always comes down to actually what specifically works for me. What are the things that calm me? What are the things that bring me well-being? And that may not be the same for the person next to you. Yeah, so focusing on that is really important. Yeah, so again, how do we handle the inner voice that I'm on a constant race with myself? Again, centering can really help with that. Centering can really help with that. But again, the centering takes, we talked about this last time with the inner critic, centering helps to draw your attention, your focus away from the inner critic and towards this other version of yourself, this inner leader. And using that centering as a method of transferring across from one to the other. Thank you and goodbye to everyone. I wish you a lovely rest of your day, and I will be back in a couple of weeks' time where we'll be looking at boundaries and saying no more effectively, more assertively, and more kindly to ourselves and to others. So thank you.